right, welcome back to LOAH Pod. Thank you all for tuning in. I am your host, Loa, as well, the host and the housewife. And of course, you know my co host, Christina McGavin, the
Hello,
enlightened housewife.
hello.
Now, we are back here with a new video. This will be our episode 5 from the LOAH Pod. I do have a special guest, and this special guest, I believe, has a good story to tell. Because in a time where society has reached a point of no return, where we have children growing up confused as never before, a severe weakness in men and modern women who fell very far from grace, today our special guest will tell a story that many might need to listen to or even experience. A tough journey of hers from being lost herself to finding a path to righteousness, faith, and understanding. Let's welcome our guest, Lady Griff, on the LOAH Pod.
Woo!
Welcome,
Hey,
Lady Griff.
Hey,
hey, thank you guys for having me.
absolutely. We're
Thank
so
you for
excited to have you.
Right. Definitely excited. This being a new podcast, I am really honored for you to even want to come and join our new channel. Truly
I,
appreciate that.
I'm honored to be even like here at this point. Like,
We this has been in discussion for like months and months now, so I'm just so excited that the moment is finally here.
yes.
And we get to hear such an incredible testimony today of just redemption and faith and unconditional love of the Lord. I'm just so excited to hear this and to give this to anybody that's willing to listen to your incredible testimony today, Lady Griff.
Yes. Now, if you want to, go ahead and open up to who you are to everybody that will be watching this.
Okay. Well, I'm Lady Griff on Instagram or Lady Griffin on Instagram. You can find me there. So I was born and raised in a small town in Ohio, and I grew up here, and it's been a very long, long journey. Um, but if you guys would like me to start, I could just go ahead.
Yes. Go ahead. Feel free.
Yeah,
Okay.
just do a deep dive, whatever you want to do.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So, see, I was born and raised here in this little town in Ohio, and so I'll start off with my first memory, if you guys don't mind. So, my first memory is like, okay, so when we start cognitive memory, it's like around the age of 3, the last time I checked in psychology, um, and that was actually around the age of my first memory. But my first memory wasn't something that was like something like playing ball with my dad or my mom making cookies, or it was nothing like that at all. My first memory was of spiritual warfare. And with that spiritual warfare, excuse me, it went like this. So I was sitting there, I was playing on my little, I was either a toy piano or my trucks or something. I was always a tomboy. I liked trucks. Even when I was born, it's just the way it was. You know, I grew up in the country. There were fields surrounding the house. It was that type of thing. So I'm sitting there playing with my toys or whatever. My mom was doing laundry in the hallway. So you had like the living room, you had the kitchen, and then you had the hallway. Well, the wash and dryer was in the hallway. So she was sitting there folding laundry. And I remember I looked up at her, and in the broken English that I could speak, I was like, "Do you see those two guys on the counter?" And she looks at the counter. She's like, no. And I looked back, and she was very confused. And I looked back up at the counter, they were still there. And next thing I know, it was like this escalation. It was, I didn't know what they were at the time, but looking back, like, it was an angel and a demon. So the demon and the angel were speaking a language I never even heard before. Like, I didn't know. To me, I was a kid. I was really super little. I didn't understand anything. And I looked up at the counter, seeing these two figures sitting there, and they started arguing like heavily. I could tell because like the body language is like super abrasive. Like you can tell by looking at somebody in their body language if they're angry or not, right? So these two were having this argument back and forth, and then one of them the demon said my name, like looked at me, said my name, looked back at the angel, and then had a fireball appeared in his hand. And right, I was about to throw it, and right, I was just gonna let go. They both disappeared. After that, chaos ensued in my entire life. So I knew after that, growing up, I knew something wasn't right. and I knew there was spiritual warfare there, but I didn't know till later on when I got into church what that was. So I'll try to shorten this just a little bit because it can get extremely long. And I was 5
Yeah,
years
that's
old.
okay. I definitely want to get your family structure and everything involved
Okay.
as well. So you can definitely relate to that.
Okay, cool. So at 5 years old, I was raped by the neighbors down the street. Now, mind you, I lived on a road that, like I said, is out in the middle of nowhere in the country. So you had like our trailer, then my grandparents' house, the neighbor across the street, and then this other neighbor right on the other side. And then there's fields for miles. Like there wasn't a lot going on. But this family had moved into this house and excuse me. And so they apparently, from the rumor that we heard, uh, they were kicked out of like half the states in the US. Now, whether this is true or not, I have no idea. But they didn't necessarily have a good rap, we'll put it that way. And so the next thing I know, what I remember is I didn't remember it actually happening. Praise God for that. He kind of blocked that out of my memory so I didn't have to relive that trauma and have that memory of that. But what I do remember is this. They were very chaotic, and there was a lot of stuff that was stolen from my parents' house and all these things. But when this happened to me, the only thing I can remember is my mom screaming at my dad, "Aren't you going to do anything? Do you see what they did to her?" That's all I remember. So I praise God that I don't have that memory of that happening. Now, I didn't actually find this out until about a year ago. My mom told me this. So it was like, well, that does kind of explain a lot. So moving forward, about 10 years old, I had started getting into church heavily. My family was in the church heavily and all of the things. And we had jumped churches a lot. Like my family traveled, not like we didn't move like our location, but we did travel churches and stuff in schools. So in the church aspect of it, I ended up at this church in Springfield, um, which is a city that's pretty far away from us. But we traveled a good distance to get there, and there was a family there, and my parents got really close with their parents, and their boys. One was 19, and one was like 15 or something. I don't really remember. Well, the 19-year-old took a liking to me, and I am. And at this point in my life, I didn't really get a lot of love from my family, like from my family members, my parents. They were so busy at the time arguing amongst themselves that us kids kind of got left in the dust. We didn't
And
really have.
you were the age of 10 when you met
Yes,
this 19-year-old? Okay.
yeah, and so I was trying to find love because I didn't feel that my parents loved me. So I was grasping already at that age. I was already grasping at what love was because I didn't know. I didn't have the good example set in front of me, right? So next thing I know, he told me that if I didn't do what I was told, he was going to bring a bullwhip to my house, cat o' nine tails whip. And I knew he had it because he showed it to me. And lo and behold, he brought it. Now, granted, things didn't get too out of hand. He was caught before, like my dad was watching over me that night and making sure that nothing crazy would happen. And praise God that nothing did. But fast forward, when I was 18, I ended up watching the news at like 11 o'clock at night, and I got my justice. They said this guy's name, and he was arrested for molestation of multiple girls.
Wow.
So I had got my justice at 18 at 11 o'clock on the news. So I was very grateful for that. Like it really kind of took me back, but at the same time, like I was kind of numb to my pain at that point, so I didn't really care. But I realized
How many?
later on, yeah,
How many? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. How many women? How many girls was it? Or he just wanted up?
the news
Go
just
ahead.
said multiple.
Okay, they didn't mention
Yeah.
how many. He's done this before on multiple occasions. Okay.
Yeah. And he did end up in prison. So there was that. I think he's probably out now, but I don't know. Anyway, so after that instance, I ended up in a couple other churches. Now, in 5th grade, I started playing the drums. And on my 13th birthday, I got my first drum set. Now, there was a lot of chaos throughout my family, a lot of fighting. Nobody really got along. My grandmother didn't really like my mom at that point. My mom didn't like my grandmother because she didn't like how she was being treated in my dad's side of the family. All this stuff ensued. Um, so day of my 13th birthday came, and I told God, I was like, Lord, I really want to serve you in this capacity. You've given me this gift to be able to play the drums. I want to return it back to you. So, Lord, if you could, please allow me to have this drum set. I really want it for my birthday. And he did make a way for my parents to be able to get it. And that day on my 13th birthday, my grandmother came up to me and told me I was fat. I got called beached whale as a kid for my cousins and the neighbors. I was constantly bullied and ridiculed. My 4th grade teacher told me I was never going to amount to anything because I didn't know my multiplication tables. Now, mind you, at that time, from 3rd grade on to 4th grade, so in 3rd grade, I was going to a school called Franklin Monroe. And 4th grade, I went to a school called Tri-Village. Well, in Franklin Monroe, they were starting their addition and subtraction in 3rd grade. While in Tri-Village, they were starting their multiplication and division in 3rd grade. So by the time I transferred, I missed an entire year. Like, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know what multiplication was. Well, my 4th grade teacher decided she was going to scream at me in front of the entire class that I was never going to amount to anything and I was worthless. From that moment on, I no longer cared about school. Nor much less about myself, because I was already getting bullied constantly. I was sticking up for my brother. He was getting bullied, and I was the one having to protect everybody all the time. And so I've always had this kind of like protection mechanism when it comes to people. If I see somebody being treated unjustly or unfairly, I automatically jump in no matter how dangerous the situation could be. So a lot of that was going on. Fast forward a little bit, I ended up on multiple worship teams at different churches, because like I said, we've jumped around a lot. I went to 6 different schools throughout my childhood. At least I think that's how many it was. Next thing I know, I am drumming for this one church, and this was after all the myriad of churches that I had drummed for in their worship teams. Like, I was young, like I think 12 years, like, was it? No, it was about 13. Yeah, between 12 and 13, I started drumming for worship teams. And throughout this process, I was going to Acquire the Fire conventions. I was doing all of that stuff. Like, and those things really impacted me heavily. There was even a moment where God had given me a dream after I came back from one of the Acquire the Fire conventions. And what that basically was is I had gotten so heavy laden from the Acquire the Fire convention that when I came back, I was so grief stricken. And in that grief strickenness, I went back into my parents' bedroom because I didn't have room. I slept on the couch growing up. I had no room. The living room was my room. So I went back to their room because everybody was out there. I just needed a moment with God. And I wept so hard that I almost passed out. And when I did finally get to sleep, I had this most amazing dream. The dream was this. I got up and I decided I have to go check the mail. So in the process of this, I was like, I'm going to go check the mail. So I get up, go outside. Like, I could smell the air. I could smell the grass. I remember everything, every detail. And I almost get to the mailbox. And all of a sudden, I felt the worst pain in my shoulders I ever felt. And then it started to itch. But during the pain part, I ended up on my knees. I couldn't move. Like, my knees would not move. I was just in so much pain. I was stuck to the ground. And my shoulder started to itch. And I remember scratching my back and pulling. I was just started scratching. Blood was coming out. I could see the blood on my hands. And I pulled out. I was like, what in the world? And I started looking. I was pulling feathers out of my back. And all of a sudden, these wings sprouted. No, mind you, I couldn't go anywhere because my knees were solidified in the ground. It was like they merged in with the grass. And then suddenly, when I was looking down at the grass, and all of a sudden, there was this golden hue. And in this golden hue, I was like, what is happening? And I looked up and I saw heaven.
Hmm.
And I looked around, I could see everything. I still remember the types of clouds that were there. Like the clouds, there was mountains, a waterfall, there was streams, there was rivers through the cities. Like it was the most amazing thing I ever seen in my life. And there was this one thing that he told me. He said, I have much for you to do. It's not your time yet. You see, when I was awake and praying, I was begging God to take me out of this world because I couldn't take it. I just wanted to come home. And he said, I have much for you to do. So the next morning I woke up and everything else kind of blurred out a little bit. From all the pain and everything that I had suffered with my dad and my mom, um, I dated boys and all of that, but it never really did anything. All the guys that I was interested always told me I was just going to be one of the guys. I was somebody to hang out with, right? Um, I was,
You were friend zoned. They
yeah, I was
friend
always,
zoned you.
yeah,
Mhm.
all the time. I was always constantly being friend zoned all the time. And there got to a point where I was like, you know what? Fine. If no man will ever love me, then
Can I interrupt you real quick? When you say you
yeah,
were one of the guys, do you mean like more like tomboyish? Like would you
yeah,
say you were like more on the tomboyish realm? Okay.
yeah. I was
Okay.
totally tomboyish. Like my dad taught me how to change brakes in a car when I was like 9. Like,
Gotcha. Okay. All right, right.
like I did that. I hung outside. I built forts. Like I was like 10 years old building speaker boxes. I had a circular saw right next to my leg, cutting the wood on a bucket. Like that's the kind of stuff, like redneck type stuff you do.
Right.
But yeah, so I was always told I was one of the guys and whatnot. And I had that moment where I said to myself, and I literally spoke this out loud, and I forget, I really think that oftentimes we forget how powerful our words really are.
Mhm.
Because it says in the Bible that the power of life and death are in the tongue.
Yep.
I didn't realize at this time that I was speaking a curse on myself. I said, if I am not, if no man will ever love me, then I'll become my own man.
Mm. Wow.
And I was dead serious about it.
Mhm. What age
Now,
were you in that decision?
yeah. So it went from the dream
What age were
Mhm.
you?
to that, and I think I was somewhere between 10 and 15. I'm not sure. Some of the dates are hazy, but it's been a long time. I mean, I'm 38. Like, it's
Right.
been a while. But so I ended up, the last guy I was ever with, I was like 14, 15 years old, and we dated for about 7 months. Well, the entire time that I dated him, I was drunk. Like he had me totally drunk. And mind you, just an FYI, it's a horrible idea to get hooked up with somebody at the fair. Don't do that. So yeah, don't do that. I hooked up with this guy at the fair. I was drunk. Like the first taste of alcohol I had, I downed a 24 pack of Bud.
Your
Um,
first time drinking alcohol
mhm.
at the age of 15.
Yeah,
Well, you said between 13 and 15, correct? Am I correct? It was like
yeah. Just like
still,
14,
still
15
like
ish.
that's you. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was super young at that point. He introduced me to cigarettes. I smoked from 15 years old up until my, I want to say early 30s, mid to early 30s. Um, so there was this whole fiasco with this guy, right? And he was one of those ones. He was bad news from the get go, and I just refused to see it because I was in so much pain that I was numb to my pain, and I no longer cared because of that, right? Because you don't know that you're in pain anymore if you're that numb, right? Well, there was a moment where like we were together, and I wanted to spend time with him. At least that's what I thought. And he kept fighting me on it and fighting me on it. I was like, no, I want to go with you. Where are you going? He never told me where we were going. And he finally caved because, I hounded the crap out of him. Next thing I know, we're going down to Kentucky on a crack run.
Mhm.
And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I'm done with this. So we get back.
Okay. So you were introduced to it. Or did you become a user later? You were
No, I
just
did not.
introduced. Okay.
They offered it to me and I refused. I was like, I am not having this. Like, my life is messed up enough. I don't need this on top of it.
Okay.
Mm.
And you were 15, you said, at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
So we get back and everything. The relationship ends. Later on, he tells me that he's going to have somebody follow me everywhere I go. He was trying to pull the controlling narcissistic card, I guess. And of course, after he said that, I was terrified, for a very long time. And well, he tried to get me to take him back, but he failed miserably, because in this instance, what he did was he came to my house with his nieces in the back of the car. They had to be between 5 and 8, right? And he comes up there, and this is where I just had enough. I saw him pull in the driveway, and I told my brother, go load the shotgun. Now, my parents weren't home. This is the middle of summer. We weren't in school. So I told my brother, go load the shotgun. I'm not doing this anymore. And I go out there. I see what he wants. And my brother's already got the shotgun loaded at this point. And I said, what do you want? He's like, I quit smoking pot and da-da-da-da-da. I quit doing that. And then he proceeds to show me the track marks from the heroin on his arm. I told him, I said, if you don't get off my property within 30 seconds, or by the time I come back outside, I will shoot you in the face with a 12-gauge buckshot. And he's like, how can you say that with my nieces in the back car? I said, how can you show me track marks from drugs on your arm with your nieces in the back of the car? I said, get
So
off my land.
this was your first toxic relationship that you had at the age of 15.
Yeah.
You had a toxic relationship.
Yeah,
I
super
didn't
bad.
mean to cut you off, because I know a lot of my questions probably you're gonna even hit some of the questions that I have for you. But how old was the man you were with? This is not the
No,
yeah, because
this
the other
was,
one went to prison. This is a
yeah.
total different guy. So how old was he for you to be at the age of 15?
I think he was about 17 or 18. I can't
Okay, so
remember
you
for
wasn't
sure.
too far.
Yeah, we weren't too far apart in age.
Okay.
Yeah. So he finally left, and I never seen him since. Well, until this one moment. So I ended up in this process, before all this had ended up fully happening, I ended up leaving him for a chick. I came out at 15 years old as a lesbian. So with that happening, I lost my placement in the worship team at the church that I was going to. And they, instead of sitting me down and like said, we're going to take these measures, we're going to do this, that, or the other. No, their approach at that church was this. So I was drumming on their worship team at this specific location on Sunday mornings. So that was like the big deal, right? And then on their youth band as well. And the youth pastor found out about what was going on. And he pulled me into his office with him and his wife. Now, my parents were not involved in any of this, and they should have been. And he sat me down. He said, this is what we're going to do. First, he's like, is this true? And I was like, yeah, this is what's going on. And he said, well, this is what we're going to do. He goes, I need you to train your own replacement, and you're not allowed back in this church, let alone step foot on the property ever again.
So the
Okay, so
church
the church
abandoned
was
you.
against they were against the whole
Oh, yeah.
thing there.
Yeah. And
A quick
yeah.
question. So the toxic relationship pushed you into wanting to experience women.
Mm-hmm.
That specific, and that was the first relationship you've actually had, right?
Like long term, that relationship
Long term.
yeah, that lasted 7 months. Everything else, like I had like
So
maybe,
you dated guys before, but they were
yeah,
just always short term.
yeah,
Okay. So you
yeah,
were kind of more of like a serial dater before you met him. He lasted the longest, and that was kind of like the last straw. And that
yeah,
honestly wouldn't be that relationship wouldn't necessarily be what could, push you into that realm of dating women as well, because you've had a troubled childhood as your experience at 5 years old, what you went through at 10. It definitely gives an idea of why you started to deter from what you were growing up in, because it sounds like you grew up religious, but you deterred from it. And the church was not in agreement with that. So how long did that go? How long did that happen with you experiencing the same sex?
up until I was like 34, 35.
Okay, so women were your longest,
Yeah.
longest actual
the guy
relationships.
the guy that I got involved with in the affair that lasted 7 months and the whole drug thing, I caught him and all that. I actually lost my virginity to that guy.
Okay.
So there's another whole thing, right? That's where a lot of that can
So
come from too.
so when you guys split up and you ended up seeing a woman, was that your first, like, I guess, looking back on your memory, was that your first experience in recognizing like attraction to another woman, or like do you think that's definitely what pushed you into it, or do you think there's times where you could look back on where like you started recognizing women earlier?
I think it was one of those things where it kind of, because the way it happened with that person, we were best friends. We got
Okay.
super, super close, and then we got too close.
Right.
And it just kind of went downhill from there. And then after that fact, I started noticing things. After that fact, I was like, oh, well, that person's attractive, and this person's attractive, and oh, I bet they're. So it kind of snowballed from that moment.
So you guys were like really close friends, and then it started from there. So do you think it was just a lot of confusion? It was all kind of stemmed in confusion for you at that time?
Oh yeah, it was from well, not even so much confusion at that time. It was from pain.
Yeah.
I was in so much pain, I no longer cared, and I was done with men
Yeah.
I
at
mean,
that
like with
point.
your friend though, with like your
Oh,
your
yeah.
girlfriend, like it was, but you were confused, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, because it was one of those things where I was like, well, if this is where I'm going to find love, like, this must be it.
Then so be it. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, and that was kind of always been that matter of fact type person when it's like, oh, well, this is the way it is, then this, I'm just going to go with it.
Right.
So, your family structure, you come from a two-parent home.
Yes.
It sounds like. Who would you say was the lead of your household?
My mother.
Your mother.
Interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, we all know where that's coming from. Like, we already know where that's the mess up right there. Like, I had a horrible example. My mom ran over my dad a lot, still does, on occasion. And yeah, it's just, there's a lot entailed there. I will say this, there's a lot of days even now where he doesn't walk straight up and down. Like, he kind of hides a little bit. So
So your father, you're closer to your father? Or are you closer to your mother?
I was always closer to my dad than my mom.
Mhm. Okay. And I think you said there's a few times you said while you were telling your story on how you wish your parents were there in a certain situations. What was it the simple fact that there was a fear of letting them know what was going on with you mentally, due to your father not being able to put his foot down and your mother being overbearing, or was there issues going on in your home that made you detach from them?
Oh
Because
yeah,
you wanted
massive
to, yeah,
issues.
but you wanted to detach. Okay, so it was more of a detachment from your parents because just
Yeah.
the instability of them, of the structure.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was so much inconsistency. Like, there were so many times my parents told me we're going to go to the park, and this is just an example. Uh, hey, we're going to go to the park, and then 2 hours later, it's no, we're not going. So it's a lot of broken promises, a lot of broken. It's like almost like a broken home.
Did you have anybody, like, during all of this chaos, really, I guess you could say, like, did you have anybody that you could latch on to, or did you have anybody or were you just really just a loner?
I was kind of a loner. I was the outcast of outcasts growing up. Like, the outcast didn't even want to hang out with me, so I had nobody to really confide in.
Okay.
No siblings?
I have one brother. He
Mhm.
ended up having he ended up having some issues that prevents him from having healthy relationships. And however, that was something of his own choice. When you spend your entire childhood on a computer, you can imagine the things you see.
Right.
Gotcha.
So there's that.
Gotcha. I'm sorry. We don't mean to keep interrupting you.
Oh, you're absolutely fine.
But yeah, let's keep it going.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I was like, do you have a question, Christina?
Yeah, no,
Um,
my mind started
okay.
like going off for a second.
Right, but yes, you can go ahead, Lady Griffin. Continue where you
Okay.
left off.
So all that happened. I got involved with this chick, and so fast forward from 15 to about 18. Um, I gotten heavily involved. I took her family on as my own family, so I rejected my own family because of all the chaos. Come to find out, her family had a lot of chaos. Whose family doesn't have some sort of chaos in their life? And so there was a moment where her stepdad, she had a third-degree burn on her arm. She worked at Taco Bell, and she was pinned up against the wall. And I walked in because I heard her screaming from outside. I was in my car, and I hear her screaming from outside the house. And I grab my box knife and I run in. And she's got a little brother and sister at the time, and all these things. And I run in, ready to fight, like I'm ready to go. And her stepdad's not that much older than me, so I was like, okay. So next thing I know, I walk in. He's got her pinned up against a wall, and her little brother and sister are trying to pull him off of her. I was like, well, that's clearly not going to work. And they're like screaming and crying and everything else. And I was like, this is chaos. So I somehow pull him off of her. And this is one of my big downfalls with my temper and the whole protection thing.
Mhm.
I ended up like threatening his life in front of his kids and told him I'd do it in front of them. And at that point, like he backed up and nothing was ever said. Nothing was ever done. A few months later, he got me a job. So I think part of that was he realized that I was willing to protect his family even against him. So we ended up being fine. Actually, I seen him last year, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you forever." So like we're totally cool. It was just weird how that instance came up, but I will say that God's hand was on me even in that moment, because otherwise I could have been thrown in prison really fast.
Yeah.
So fast forwarded to that, at 18 into my early and mid 20s, I was, well, actually early to late 20s, I ended up in the drag scene heavily at the bars. Um, I was always kind of a performer on stage because of the drumming thing. God blessed me with that, but I turned his gift into something evil. And so I was started frequenting the gay bars, started getting introduced into drag, started doing drag. And I remember the first time that I put the makeup on my face, and it was one of those moments where it's like, oh,
And
like
like for
maybe.
the drag, you were transforming into the presentation of a man, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So at that moment of putting all the makeup on, the glue on my face, and I started like chopping my hair up real fine. I'd get a haircut, chop it up real fine, and then put it on and to form a goatee. Well, in that moment, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the reason why I feel so weird all the time. Maybe this is the reason why I feel so uncomfortable in my own skin. Once again, it was reacting out of pain because I never dealt with my pain from my childhood. So,
So
for
that was the eye-opening kind of experience you had on starting to make that reality.
yeah, yeah,
Your drag
that
shows. Okay.
yeah,
And you
that's
were
that.
18.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the catalyst. So, with that, I decided that I was going to come out to my family as trans, and this is where like a lot of my big regrets come in, because, but like granted, I know I've been forgiven and all of those things, but I still remember some of the words that I said, and I twisted. See, this is where I was doing the devil's work for him. He didn't have to do anything. He could sit back and watch me do all the work for him, because I
Right.
believed the lie so heavily, right? So, and believing that lie so heavily and doing his work for him, I legitimately told my dad's like, well, it says this in the Bible. And I said, yeah, but you can't tell me that Jesus is a carpenter. He didn't remodel a room from time to time. You want to
Okay.
talk about some of the worst words you could ever speak? That's it. Like, I'm pretty sure at that point, he probably wanted to drop kick me through a Prius.
Mhm.
But needless to say, I was really messed up, right? So I ended up going through with this stuff, right? Like I ended up I've been in multiple relationships up throughout my 20s and stuff, because the relationship with the first girl ended. I got abusive. She cracked me across the center of the head one good time, and that was the end of it. I wasn't having it, so I ended up leaving her and all of that. And I can't tell you how many people I've probably been with. I lost count years ago. So throughout that process, I ended up getting my name changed, um, getting my gender marker changed, moved up to uh, uh, Sandusky, Ohio in 2012. Right, so that's like Cedar Point area. So I moved up there, and
Did
that's where I,
you experience the hormonal changes as well? Did you have to go through the whole
yeah,
medical transformation of that? How long did you do that for?
that lasted 12 years.
So you were on
Wow.
hormones for 12 years?
I was having that persona for 12 years. I was on hormones for about 6 or 7 years.
Okay, so that's still quite some time though.
Yeah.
That is a lot of time.
Now, I wanted to ask you this as well. Now that we're like asking questions real quick, while you were going through like the transitioning experience and all of those things, did you have anybody that you would say that was like in your inner circle? Like, what were your friendships like? Like, did you have anybody that was like influencing this, or were you kind of like all of this came upon itself like more independently? Like, you know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I did have influence because I hung around the drag bars and all of that. So I did have those influences. A lot of my influences were more acquaintances than anything, and then watching other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I've always been kind of set apart, an outcast over the years throughout my life. And so I took that on from other people. I became other people. So I lost who I was a long time ago. Like the walk that I had built, like on how I walked, was based off of 3 different people's walks that I've observed in my life. So I didn't even know how I walked. I didn't know who I was, period.
What
Right.
being raised into a devout home, and it sounds like you've had the belief of it and you were faithful to it even in your youth. What do you think pushes someone to rebel against the faith,
What do
even
you
though
think?
that everything that you went through and your decisions are, are emotional based? There are emotional based decisions. You know, your homestead not being the appropriate way of life to actually mold you and build the path that you need, and then you had some experiences underage that should have never happened. And I think you're probably definitely not the only one. Um, but you still had that religion within you. You were having dreams, you were having experiences.
Oh yeah.
What things what do you think pushes someone to still rebel against everything that they follow religiously?
Emotional pain.
Just the emotional pain.
Oh yeah, emotional pain can be manipulated in so many forms that it's one of those things. It's extremely powerful. It can make you deny the very thing that you know to be true.
Hmm.
Something there that people need to understand.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that's why emotions have to be controlled to an extent, because if it can take you away from something that you're devout in, um, and have thorough belief in, then obviously, you know, there has to be some type of. I guess that's why you asked Christina of who else she had around, because our circles are what make us as well.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. And it seems like the only group of people that you've had around you were the people that you're enjoying to be someone else.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Oh yeah.
I think that influence definitely is going to push you into a path that you would realize later might not have been the best. But I appreciate that answer on that. The emotional pain that you went through made you not even want to consider your faith in your decisions.
Oh yeah. Like it's interesting too, because like even with that, like for it's not even so much I think as controlling emotion, but I think it's learning how to properly cope and deal with the emotions that you have. Because I was never taught those coping skills. My mom still has trouble trying to cope with things. Like I will say this boundaries class helps a lot. Uh, um, but yeah, so oh, shoot, where was I?
What take me to the point that you got What was the most impactful experience that made you start to go back to following your religion and
Ah,
becoming who you are now? Take me
okay.
there. What caused that? What was the most impactful experience that made you do that?
So that started, there was a catalyst of a lot of little tiny things that built up to a major thing. And a lot of the little tiny things started at one of my jobs. There was a guy actually, he was a truck loader, and he comes up to me and goes, "Hey, have you ever heard of this guy called NF?" And I was like, "No, why?" He goes, "Here, listen to it." So I sat there and I was listening to it. Little did I know that NF was a Christian rapper.
Hmm.
And the things that he talked about, I related to was so much I broke down at work. Like I was just, that was this catalyst. That was the start of the breaking. And years went by and I ended up reading all the way through Imagine Heaven, right? And this was in the process. Like I had already had hormones, my name changed, the whole 9 yards done. Like I was growing a full beard, like all the things. And
Did you experience I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off again. But did you experience any doubts at all of like what you were doing?
at first, no.
Okay.
At first, no. But I was in so much denial that, of course not. you know.
Right. Right.
So was working in my heart from that moment. When I got to that job, he was already started working in my heart. So throughout that time, up towards the end of it all, so I had ended up getting my letters. I had to go through therapy for a year before I could get. Now everything's changed. Now it's different. Now you don't have to have all this, but when I was doing it, you had to have it. So I had to have a letter from a therapist who was also trans, by the way. Yeah, that worked out in my favor. So I went ahead and had to go through that for a year. I got a letter of recommendation from the therapist to a surgeon, a plastic surgeon, and I little little to no time flat, I was being prepped for a double mastectomy, and I was sitting in the hospital room. And now the person I had ended up with, who was my best friend for many years, even after the relationship ended, she was the catalyst to get me back to church. And that was like the big moment right there. Like, she's like, we need to start going to church. So then I was like, okay. And I never thought I'd ever step foot into church again, but she was the one that got me there. So God was using her even in the midst of all that stuff. So anyway, I was lying in a hospital bed and I had IVs hooked up to me, the whole 9 yards. They just administered the anesthesia, right? And all the doctors left. You know how they do. Like, they leave, make sure it kicks in, blah, blah, blah. Give it some time. So after they all left, and this part always gets me emotional, I can actually feel stuff right now happening. So I'm sitting there in silence. And I'm sitting there in silence, and the next thing I know, I heard God's voice for the first time in 20 years.
What did he say?
He was pleading with me to the point where I could hear the tears rolling down his face and hitting the floor. And he said, "Please don't do this." He said, "I didn't make you this way. It doesn't have to be like this. Please don't do this. You don't have to do this." Sorry.
No, you're totally fine.
Take your time. It's okay.
So I was in so much emotional pain that I ignored him. I still had the chance to say, no, I don't want to do this. And I did it anyway. So the next 2 weeks,
I'm
huh?
sorry. You went through with the surgery? You
Yeah,
actually went and got the surgery?
yeah.
Wow. So you cannot be a mother.
No, it was double mastectomy. I had my breast removed.
Oh, you had your breast. Okay. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
thought you had hysterectomy. I
No,
apologize. No. Okay.
no, not that. um. So the next 2 weeks were the hardest weeks of healing my life, and not because of the physical pain. Now, this was an outpatient surgery. But so I went home and my drugged up stupor from the anesthesia. I was so sick from the anesthesia. Like I was chalk white when I woke up and I thought I was going to throw up.
Mm.
But the next morning I woke up with a thought in my head of what have I done? And I struggled with that
So
for
you
3 years.
instantly had like immediate remorse and regret.
Immediate regret.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay.
And
So
so,
right after, like literally right after having it, you felt it. So it doesn't
yeah,
take much for you to realize, okay, you've made
yeah,
this was might not have been the decision you wanted to do right
yeah.
after the surgery. That's pretty bad there.
So, I woke up asking myself, what have I done? But then I decided to bury that pain for the next 3 years. Now, this is where things start to get interesting. God is the God of details, right? Like he knows the numbers of hairs on our head. He knows every aspect of us. He knew us before we were even made. So he knows every detail, every cell. He knows every cell that dies. He knows every cell that's regenerated every morning. And it took 3 years, and I was bearing that pain of that for 3 years. And throughout this whole time, he was still hammering me. He was like, I'm not letting you go that easy. So at the end of that 3 years, there was this amazing pastor from Transformation Church. His name is Pastor Michael Todd. And he was doing the sermon series called Crazy Faith. And how I found this out was I was scrolling on Facebook and it popped up on my screen. Now, this is the only church thing that came up on my screen ever. So I was like, this is interesting. I want to check this out. And he was sitting there giving this analogy about, do you want this big comfy chair for your life or this little tiny kid's chair? What if this little tiny kid's chair is God's plan for your life? He was using this analogy and I was hooked. I was instantly hooked. I watched all of the Crazy Faith series. And then the next series after that was Relationship Goals Reloaded.
Mm.
And by the end of that series, I shut the TV off and I looked at the person I was with and I said, I need to tell you something. And she looked at me, she goes, what? I said, this is what happened the day that when I was going in for surgery. This is what happened. And she goes, that's exactly the confirmation I've been praying for.
Wow.
I said, what? She goes, I'm leaving you.
Wow.
And at the time I was heartbroken, like one would be. Like we were together for like 6-7 years. Like I was heartbroken, but I looked at her straight in the face and I was not angry, which is weird. Like I wasn't mad at her. I just looked at her straight in the face. I said, I can't be mad at you for that. For the reasons that she gave me, I could not be mad. And the wonderful thing was, even after we split up because we were living together, she stuck around long enough for me to get my finances in order.
Oh.
She stuck around long enough to teach me how to do a budget, because all of the time that I was in all of these relationships, even my first girlfriend, when it came time, she was doing my budget. I didn't know how. I still struggle with money, because everybody else did it for me.
So you were in a 6-7 year relationship with her, and she just told you that she no longer wants to be with you, but she's willing to help you make sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
So she cared. So what was the decision behind that? Why did she decide that if she still had enough care to at least make sure you had some stability for you?
Well, she told me the reason why she was leaving me was because she was praying for many years because she felt like she was a lesbian and didn't like it. And it was like, I can't blame you for that, because that's what it is. At the end of the day,
7
that's what
years,
it was.
she didn't like being a lesbian?
Yeah, like she
That,
was, when I got with her, she was straight. Like I was the first.
okay.
Yeah.
You
I,
turned
So
around.
you
yeah.
were her first experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So, but we were close enough and understood and respected each other enough that when she did that and she said that she was leaving, she cared enough about my well-being to make sure that I was going to be okay emotionally, financially, make sure that the things were in order that needed to be done. We stayed friends up until the middle of last year. And she was like, look, this is too weird for me. I can't keep going like this. So I'm out. And it wasn't necessarily that cold, but I'm just paraphrasing. Like, look, this is a little weird. And yeah, it was a little weird. Like, I'll admit that. It could be a little weird. But I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, I respect your decision. And that's where that friendship ended.
Can I ask you a question real quick? This is kind of just
Absolutely.
something that came to mind since you're kind of diving into your relationship with her a little bit.
Mhm.
Do you think it's possible for two members of the same sex to love one another the way that a man and a woman love one another?
Legitimately, no. Because
Okay.
it's rooted in pain.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
I can agree to
because I
that.
have my own opinions. I just wanted to know like what your response would be. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you don't
It's
it's not in
so
your
would be
opinion,
make
it's
it
not a possibility to love the
No.
way the
To
opposite sex.
to genuinely love the way God intended, absolutely not.
Okay.
Because all of those decisions are made from, in my experience, all of those decisions are made from pain and being numb to that
emotions.
pain and being in denial. All of those things, those are hardcore decisions. And it's interesting because each time that pain creeps up, you shove it down farther. And then it
Right.
comes back up and then you shove it down farther.
A lot of
It's,
repression.
yeah, it's a lot of repressing feelings. It's a lot of repressing the past. It's undealt with emotions. And when you don't deal with them properly, it always turns bad.
Right. And I appreciate you answering these, and it's just because you're very credible. You've experienced a lot of things in your life. So as things pop up, I just want to make sure we're asking things that other people may be curious of. And that was something that I've always questioned of, since you and I both come from faith, some people don't believe the same things that we do, but I wanted to ask you, being that you did live the lifestyle, if you think it's a possibility for two members of the same sex to love one another the way that a man and a woman do. And so your answer is no, because God designed man and woman to come together and unite as one flesh. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, you're fine.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So then this is more coming closer up to now. So after all that, I ended up breaking in half, right? And at the end of it, after she had left the apartment and everything, I hit my knees and I was like, Lord, I give you all of it. I said, I give you who I am. I give you my sexuality. I give you all the pain. I give you this. I give you that. On and on and on and on. Like, I was sobbing on the floor, on my knees, as one should be. And I was just like, I give you all of me. Do with me what you will. I will go where you send me. I will go wherever you want me to go. I'll be your hands and feet. You tell me what you need me to do. So some time passes, a couple weeks. I lose my job. I gave away my car. And now I'm walking everywhere.
Wait. You just kind of slid that in there. So you just gave away your car. Like,
yes.
You got back up for a second. You kind of just gave away my car. Like,
yeah.
Tell us how that happened. What happened with that whole experience?
Okay, so I was working at this other place. It was the last job that I had when I was in Sandusky. And I was working there, and this guy needed a car. Like, he had a family, he had a growing family at that, and their car was breaking down. And I had this little beater Hyundai Accent, and it was a stick shift. And dude's like, hey, I'm willing to buy your car off of you. And I was like, okay. So I was just, but this is where I was in my life. At this point, God had given me so much peace. I could have gotten hit by a bus and still been happy.
You would have been joyous.
I would have been
like
joyous.
still,
I know that
exactly
peace
what you
that
mean.
surpasses all understanding. That's where I was at. So
beautiful.
At the end of it, I ended up telling the guy, look, dude, you don't owe me a cent. Just keep it.
So so he didn't even buy it. You just gave it to him.
I just gave it to him.
Okay.
And so it was a mutual agreement between me and my employer that I no longer work there. And it was so interesting because the CEO, he was just like, you're not going to throw a chair at me or throw a fit? I was like, no, thanks for having me. Like, I really appreciate all you guys have done for me. Like, I was super happy about it. Like, this is what it is. And So I ended up like walking everywhere. Like I was walking to this little church or whatever, and this is also when The Chosen came out, right? So that show is like super powerful in my life as well. Like that was a big,
Same.
huge catalyst where I was grasping onto that because I could relate to it. The very first episode of the first season when uh it was like the last scene where
With Mary at the
with
bar.
with Mary at the bar, and
Yep.
he grabs a hold of her hand, and then she runs out, and he's like, he basically is quoting Isaiah 43, and that's I broke so hard. Like every single episode, I was sobbing in tears. But anyway, so I related to that though. Like I related to it heavily, and so throughout all of this stuff that was happening, right, and I'm walking everywhere in town, I was like, Lord, I'll go wherever you send me. And this is what he said. He said, I need you to go home. And I legit said this. I said, you want me to go back into the arms of my abusers? How is that going to help? And he said, you told me you would go. I was like, all right. I said, my hands are up. I said, fine. I said, but you're going to have to figure out, you're going to have to get me there. Because I have no money. I have no job. I have no car. I can't get a truck. Nothing. Like, I saved back a couple $100 or whatever, right? Well, the money that I had saved back was to get a truck. But this is what's really interesting. So there was this guy that I had met on this bearded group on Facebook, right? And I met a lot of these guys, really great guys, really great people, all this stuff. But this one guy was a Christian. And I had met up with him a couple times, and he's like, the lessons that you've learned, because I told him my story. I actually sat down and told him who I truly was. And he's like, the lessons you've learned, you didn't have to learn. They weren't yours to learn. So we ended up chatting on the phone or whatever, and he goes, so what's the plan? And because I was keeping him updated about what was going on. He's like, well, what's the plan? And I said, I don't know. It's in God's hands now because I can't use the money that I had saved for a truck because I have to pay my last month's rent. I don't know what I'm going to do. He goes, okay. He said, I'll pay your way for your truck. I said, excuse me? He said, I'll rent the U-Haul for you. This guy's in another state. No joke. Not only did he give me enough money to rent the truck, he gave me enough money to rent the truck, pay for gas to get back, fill the tank, and I still had money left over.
Wow, what a blessing.
So at this point, it's 2020 and COVID has started.
The beautiful COVID road.
Wow, so this is very recent, your experiences here of trying to get back
Yep.
to where you've fallen from. So, quick question.
Mhm.
What is the process that it takes for you to actually, you've had a major surgery.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there's a process where you're trying to go back to where you were, that you have to involve yourself in. Can you give me a good idea? Besides, because spiritually is a big part of what you're doing to even get back in a good place with yourself. What physically do you have to do?
To come back out of that?
Yes.
Okay, so I had to get my name changed back. I had to get my gender marker changed back, which costs a considerable amount of money.
It's very costly to do that, huh?
It's very costly, yes.
I
I
never
wasted a lot of money.
never even thought about like the whole financial aspect of just getting your gender markers changed.
Oh yeah.
I never even thought of that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it's different. It's different in each state. It cost me, I want to say it was like roughly $200 to get my name and gender marker changed back. And then the process of waiting the 30 days, having it posted in the paper, waiting for the court date, going back to court, doing that whole process.
So it's tedious.
It's very tedious. It's very costly. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any physical issues that you had to deal with by taking yourself off of something you've been on for so long? You said, well, you were on hormones for about 6-7 years. So when you cut that off, is it like easy to where, okay, now you're just the natural state of your body starts to take place and you can just wing it off? Or do you actually have like a physical um,
Uh,
reaction?
well, I'm sitting here chuckling not because it's funny that's the question that you ask. I'm chuckling because it's different than what most people would expect.
Yeah.
Because of God and His mercy and grace towards me, even in the mess that I made myself, I had no adverse reactions coming off the drugs,
Really?
and
So
it's
it's easier being taken off them than it is being put on. You get through, you have so much more that you have to deal with them on, but taking them off. Are you just saying that your faith helped you
oh yeah,
overcome that? So your
my fa-
faith helped you a lot more than what it would
yeah
normally do if somebody that didn't believe.
yeah my faith helped me out a lot in that actually because so what science tells us is that just as hard as it is getting on it, it's going to be just as hard getting off. Like any drug,
Okay,
it's going
it
to
is
be
like
difficult
that.
getting off
Okay.
of. But with me in particular, God made it to where I didn't have to suffer through that.
Interesting. Did
Um,
did you have any side effects from the hormones at all?
like coming off of it.
Like just any side effects while you, because some people you like bone density, just any
Oh
kind
yeah, yeah.
of, you know what I mean? Did you experience any kind of negative side effect that
Like
impacted your life while you were on the hormones themselves?
I've on the hormones. I was extremely moody.
Okay.
I They had to find the levels. It was a very long-winded process to find the right levels.
Were you angry a lot?
Oh yeah, I had rage fits for sure. Like if I like when I was at work, if a box fell on my head, I just exploded. Like
Right.
it was like I was throwing stuff in the truck, like breaking stuff. Like we shipped a lot of
So
stuff that I
everything was
broke.
just overly extreme for you because
Everything.
it
It
was
was like
testosterone, correct? Yeah.
yeah, I was taking intramuscular testosterone shots.
Okay.
Um, so that was painful in itself. So every 4 days I was doing that.
I
Interesting.
was just about to ask that. How regularly do you have to do it? So every 4 days you need to take a shot
Mhm.
Wow.
of testosterone, and you did this for 7 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was interesting too because by the time I was getting ready to wean myself off the hormones throughout that process of that last year, I was getting tired of it. I started hating it because
Like
I was like,
taking
man,
it.
yeah, I was like, I shouldn't have to do this. Like, why am I doing this? I shouldn't have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting actually sick of my own actions, which is really interesting
Right.
enough.
That is interesting.
So, but by the end of it, yeah, I ended up, there were some things that science says it's permanent, and where other things, God doesn't say any of those things are permanent. But so one of the things or two of the things out of the three that ended up being permanent for me thus far, I have to shave my face every morning. Otherwise, I will have a 5 o'clock shadow by day 4. My voice is about an octave to 2 octaves deeper than what it should be.
Yes.
I still have the voice recordings on an old iPhone that my best friend is keeping for uh, an extended period of time until the time is right. But I still have voice recordings, and I was an alto. I actually had a pretty high talking voice, but I was an alto and singing voice. But I dropped down to a baritone. So my voice is what you hear now is what it will probably always be. Uh, Now the third thing,
Really?
yeah,
So you don't. Wow.
the third
It
thing
won't
that
elevate back to having, even if you was to like take some estrogen, it wouldn't even help your voice back. That's actual permanent.
yeah, that's permanent.
Wow.
The facial hair growth is permanent. Now, what the doctors told me, there was something else the doctor said that it would be permanent, and they said that it would be my hair would not grow back. I have a kid. I kid you not. I have a picture. I had a George Jefferson horseshoe all the way around. I was bald on top. And then I started shaving my head bald all the way because I was trying to hide it, right?
So you were losing your hair quite
Oh yeah, prominently, very prominently.
okay, which is pretty
And
common for
yeah,
right. Okay.
so though I remember I was just like, Lord, look, I know I made a mess of my life, and I know I made the wrong decisions. I know I screwed your temple up. I know I made these decisions, and these are the consequences of my actions. I was like, if there's anything I could ask, would you please restore my hairline.
Mm.
So my hair that you see is a very testament of the power of God.
Amen.
Because I would not have this hair on the top of my head right now if it wasn't for him. So it's interesting about this too, because the whole hormone thing, there was a prophetess I ran across on YouTube, and it was just really weird, nonchalant, just scrolling, and all of a sudden just like this woman caught my eye, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is going on? And I haven't seen her since. It was like she disappeared off the face of the earth, and that's the reason why I feel like this person was legit. She looked straight into the camera and she said, God's telling me this, and I feel like it needs to be said. She goes, I am even restoring your hormones. And that was right when I was weaning myself off of them. And I broke. No joke. I had a doctor's appointment here where I grew up, where I'm currently residing. And you know what the doctors told me? So now, throughout being put on those hormones, I had developed hypothyroidism, which is something that my grandmother had. And amongst all the crazy other stuff that was going on because of those. And she said, I'm even, from what God was saying, I'm even restoring your hormones. I had an entire panel done. Blood work, hormones, everything. They said everything was perfect.
Wow.
Nothing was off.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. There was scientific evidence that he restored all of my hormones.
So your body has been restored back to its natural state as it was always supposed to be. That's so interesting.
And the hypothyroidism is gone.
Wow. And your hair was restored. That's incredible.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that going on. So catch you up to speed to modern day. So I ended up going to Celebrate Recovery. I attended that for 2-3 years. Throughout that process, I ended up in a 6-month relapse with my sponsor, no less. So
when you say relapse, do you mean like a relationship?
Yeah.
Okay.
And not just a relationship. This woman was married.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So I hammered that hardcore. Super regrettable. However, God was showing me something throughout that entire bit. And I'm glad that he still yanked me by my hair and brought me back. But that was the last of it. He was showing me that I was intrusive. And I had still a lot of work in that, and how by being intrusive, I was going to destroy others' lives if this wasn't dealt with. Because I didn't even realize it until after this instance. So I came back to Celebrate Recovery, and I remember that night on that Friday, I literally said everything I did. I was like, I'm just going to throw it all out there, and if you guys want me back, fine. If you don't, fine. But I have to tell you the truth. And I told them the truth. I was like, I just went through a 6-month relapse. I'm an adulterer. I'm a liar. I'm a manipulator. All of the things. Like, I was laying everything out. You know what they said to me? They said, that's okay. Let's start over. If it wasn't for my Celebrate Recovery family, I can't tell you where I would be right now. Because they were the ones that had the catalyst to go, it's okay. Let's start over. Like, this is not the end for you. We're going to work through this. So
can I just say something real quick? I think that's beautiful, because your first experience with the church was abandonment, right? And then you come in and you get honest, and God is really just starting to move in your life, and like these people welcome you with open arms, and they kind of just say, we're going to love you as you are. Like, perfect example, and perfect, like, almost, I can't say perfect, but pretty close, comparison to how God is, like, just come as you are.
Oh yeah, and the cool thing was they allowed me to get, because I was playing drums for Celebrate Recovery, and when they did that, they said, get right back up on the kit. So it was complete opposite than what I was used to. So after that moment, I went through the year, and I got down in the 12-step study. I did the hard work. I went through the hard work that it takes to get through a 12-step program. And so with that, I ended up learning how to forgive. And you remember I said my grandmother told me I was fat at 13 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Because of learning the tools, I was able to forgive my grandmother after a 25-year grudge.
I was just about to ask that question too. I think you're about to go there. Is this going to where you actually started to work out your relationship that you have with your parents?
I'm still working
Did
on
you get
that.
to that point? You're still
That's
working on it.
yeah, that's a work in progress. But when you're almost 40 years old living with your parents, it's going to be a work in progress.
Right.
That's still in the works. But it's I will say this. There has been improvement and it is better than what it was. So there is that. I can't discredit that. So throughout that process, there was a lady there that was going to celebrate recovery. She's like, "Hey, I'm going to this church. It's called EUM, and I just saw on Facebook they posted they needed a drummer." So it's interesting that this popped up at this part in time, because I was like, just before that, I was like, Lord, I really want to get back up on Sunday service and play worship on a worship band. I really want to get back up there and do what you called me to do in this capacity. It's like, Lord, please, like, just let me, like, tell me if that's something you want me to do. I want to do it. And they were like, she gives me this phone call or whatever. And she's like, hey, my church at UM is looking for a drummer. Auditions are open. This is the email address. This is who you get in contact with. I was like, great, because this is just what I've been praying for, right? So next thing I know, I'm emailing them back and forth on the correct contacts, and they're like, look, we don't allow anybody on teams unless you've been present and active for 6 months, because it's not a matter of if you're going to get attacked, it's a matter of when. And I was like, okay. I said, all right, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'm there. And so I was like, let me know when my audition is. They said, we'll let you know. So I got in there and I was like, you know what? I want to check this place out. I want to know what they're about. I want to know what's going on before I commit to something or even try to commit to something. So I walk in there that Sunday because I was like, I had a goal in mind, right? Of course, it's complete opposite of what actually happened. But I was mindset of, I'm going to scope out this drum kit. I'm going to scope out their system. I'm going to scope out all this stuff so I know what I'm working with. Oh, God had other plans. So throughout this time, I asked for 6 different places. I was like, Lord, is this what you really want me to do? Because if I take this audition, that means, oh my gosh, now I got to change churches. Like I'm not at that church. I'm at a different church. Like, what's going on? And I was like, is this where you want me to go? Is this where you want me to go? Like over and over again. Well, so I walk in the room and I get right in through the doors. Like I step 1 foot in the front of the doors, and there was such a warmth that I instantly almost started crying.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, all right. Worship started. And it was interesting because one of the guys there who was singing that day, he's got like the 80s hair band rock star singer voice. And I mean, dead on. Like, this guy is brilliant in his voice. He was singing the song Homecoming.
Crazy, isn't it?
And I walked in there, and I kid you not, I was back at Acquire the Fire all over again. And I said, this is it. This is what I've been missing. I broke. I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And when I said, this is where I'm supposed to be, in agreement with what God had for me, God said, I'm sending you here to grow.
Mm.
And that was the only thing he said to me. 6 months later, I was on the worship team. I passed my audition, and it was the thing, like, I started breaking down because I was sitting there, I was talking to the worship director and the MD and his assistant, and I was sitting there, and he's like, well, this is our plan. He goes, you made it through the audition. And he goes, so this is our plan. We're going to have you once a month on Sundays. And I was excited. I was pumped. And then he tells me, you're going to be on the youth band too. What was the 2 things that was taken from me?
Very same things that he gave you back.
And more.
Mm.
I am now on the Sunday worship team going about twice a month. I'm in their youth band. I'm on their girl time band. So I'm on 3 different bands, 3 different worship teams within the same church.
He's got you busy.
And I go to youth camp and play for the youth at youth camp. So and when I had prayed that prayer about, Lord, I really want to get back up on there. And I was trying at the church that I was going to at the time was TLC. And it was a small building, like all this stuff. And God put me on a stage twice as big than what I was asking for. Like, nobody does that. Like, who does that? He's the only one that does that, right? Like, he's the only one that does that. So throughout all that process, he's given me back what I've asked for and more. And so last year, I ended up in a motorcycle accident. I had been riding a motorcycle for many, many years. And I ended up in a motorcycle accident, and I ended up in the hospital. And my best friend, who's sitting next to me now, was involved in this story. And I can say this much. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have her in my life. God had placed her in my life for a reason. And sorry.
No, you're okay.
So I had, what happened, the motorcycle accident, I had lost my phone. It dropped off my motorcycle. And I turned around and I went to look for it and I couldn't find it. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to work real quick, tell them what's going on. I'm going to go to Walmart. I'm going to just buy a phone. I'm paid today. I'm just going to go buy a phone. It's going to be fine. So I went looking for my phone first. Couldn't find it. I was like, I'm just going to go to Walmart. I'm just going to go. So I get to this intersection that wasn't even that far from my destination. It was a couple blocks. And this car pulled out in front of me and I hit it dead on. I flew up over the handlebars, bounced off his hood, and rolled onto the ground.
Wow.
So
you
I'm
almost
running.
lost your, sound like you almost lost your life then.
Yeah. But God had his hand on me the whole time because, no joke, I walked away from the accident, basically.
Wow.
So they did escort me
Amazing.
by ambulance. They had me in the ambulance, took me to the hospital. I was like, I gotta text my best friend. Like, I gotta let somebody know what's going on, because I message my best friend every morning to say, hey, what's up? Good morning, blah, blah, blah. I was doing a morning devotional before I started my shift. And so next thing I know, I'm sitting in a hospital. I'm waiting. I was like, look, I know where she works. This is where, da-da-da-da, because I knew the one lady from church, she wasn't going to be even awake when I was in the hospital. So I was like trying to message my best friend. I was trying to get a hold of her somehow, some way. The hospital finally got a hold of her. She's at work and she's already freaking out because I'm not answering my phone, right? So she knew right away something was wrong. And the hospital called and hands me the phone. We finally got a hold of her and hands me the phone. And the phone was breaking up. She heard like 3 words, like, I'm in the hospital. And then I hear her and she can't hear me. And it was, I gotta leave. I'm out. Bye. Like, that was basically the gist of it. She's like, I'm out here. Goodbye. I gotta go. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in my hospital room and I can't hear this song without crying. I'm sitting there singing Gratitude by Brandon Lake.
I love that song.
Because I realized I could have died. So I'm sitting there singing, crying, and with my hands lifted in a hospital room. And then that's when she walks in. That whole weekend, she took care of me. That whole weekend. And I will always be grateful for that. Because I don't have many people close to me. Like, there's a lot of people know me, but they don't know me well. So we've basically been inseparable ever since. We met at church. We were on the worship team together, and we bonded over a fart.
But they weren't gonna let me back.
Do what?
They weren't gonna let me back into the room.
Oh yeah,
Matching
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
heaven.
Yeah. But oh yeah. So here's kind of a little bit of her side of the story. So a little bit of her side of the story. She was freaking out that morning because I wasn't answering my phone. So she was trying to figure out what's going on. So it was interesting because she said that for some reason, my old name, the name I had went by, the male name that I had went by, popped in her head, and she only heard it like one time. She didn't remember it at all. For some reason, when she woke up that morning, that name was stuck in her head. She got to the hospital. They were not gonna let her back there without that name.
Wow.
I mean, I would have made it back there, but
That's
Did you hear
crazy.
that?
I did hear that. I did, yeah.
She's come hell or high water. She was gonna get back there, but but yeah, they were gonna let her back there unless she knew that name, and that's how I knew God was watching over me the entire time. I walked out of
And
that
now you
hospital
do finally have somebody in your life that's
Yeah.
going to keep you on the path necessary.
Yeah, and somebody too that has wonderful boundaries. Iron sharpens iron type of friend. I can't tell you how many times she put me in my place.
Mhm.
And then on top of it, this is a friendship, and dare I say, cannot be corrupted. Because I am, first of all, unwilling to allow that to happen again. And it's just not an option. It's just not an option.
Wow. I hate that we're running out of time, but you do have to return. I hope you know that you do have to return to our pod with
Absolutely.
updates and any other information that you didn't probably even get to. I just have one question for you though before you continue. Is what is the major lesson that your story that you've told so far can teach anyone who's
I have
listening?
the same question written down, Lo.
The one lesson: you are never too far gone for God to change your life. Never too far gone. It doesn't matter how low you get. It doesn't matter how many times you feel like you're worthless. It does not matter that you feel like completely like a dumpster fire. Doesn't matter. There is no depth that he cannot reach.
Hmm.
I like that message.
Yeah, there's what is it? It says, what is it in Psalms? Like there or hell, nor heaven, nor earth, like nothing can separate you. Wherever, like you could make your bed in the depths of Sheol, and he is there. No matter how far deep you go into whatever you're dealing with, whether it be addiction, sexual immorality, whatever it is, pride, he can rescue you from the depths and still have a smile and love and compassion. He's the only one that can. That is the biggest thing.
And
What would you say to people that are currently in that experience that God rescued you from, regardless if they're aware of what they're going through or not? Some people are happy. Some people transition and they think that they're happy. So what would you say to the people that are still lost in it, even if they're not aware of the fact that they're so desperately lost?
I would say these couple of things. You're not the thoughts that you're believing about yourself. No matter how you feel about it, you're not it. You're not those things. You are not the sins and the things that you commit.
So you don't think you can be born that way, because there's people that believe that you're born trans or born non-binary or born gay. You're saying that you're not. That is not who you are.
Oh no. That is no.
Interesting. Okay.
God did not create us that way. The sickness of sin is what happened, and it's infected us to the core. It says in Jeremiah 15:9 that The heart is deceitful above all things. It is desperately sick or wicked. Who could understand it? It is not about. See, I had this question posed to me the other day about why is it, and this is from someone very young. They said, why is it Christians hate the LGBT community so much? And I said, it's not the people. I said, it's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I said, the people and what they're doing are two separate things. So we love the people. The difference is what they're doing. You are not your sin. You are not the baggage you carry. I am not the car I drive. So with that, we are not born gay. We are not born trans. We're not born pan. We're not born any of those letters except for male and female. It says God created us male and female. He created them. There is, and I believe that's Genesis chapter 128. But it's one of those things that's like, he created us. We can't change that. We don't have a choice in that. We can choose to run from him. We can choose to make bad decisions. These things, these lies that we're born this way, that's exactly what it is, a lie. Because no, it's a decision. And I know
Right.
oftentimes it's like, well, what about these kids that are like 3 and 4 years old saying, I feel like I'm a boy, and it's a little girl saying this. It's like, no, honey, no, you're not. That's what people are telling you. Those are the lies that you're believing about yourself. Don't you dare believe that for a second. Sin has
And at
infected
that
the
point,
world.
it's the parents. It's the
Mm-hmm.
parents' fault at that point because I mean, my daughter at the age of 2 played with trucks. I'm not gonna make her into a boy because she likes trucks. It's because
Right.
her husband, my husband was a truck driver. But other people that want to interfere will be
Oh yeah,
assume that that's the case. So it's
yeah,
always the adults when it comes down to these children thinking this way. You have to mold that into a child to make it for them to believe that that's the thing.
yeah.
And that's why it's in our schools. That's why it's on TV. They're trying to mold our children for us.
Oh yeah.
But
They're
as an
trying,
adult, you're right.
definitely.
It's our own decision. It is very
Yeah,
our own decision.
yeah. It's definitely a decision, and it's also too like I've also heard the argument. Well, what? How can you explain the animal kingdom? There's gay lions. Let me tell you something. Sin has infected the world so much that it's even infected the wildlife. It even states the curse of the ground that Adam had to toil with his bare hands, and that weeds sprung up. Weeds were not in the Garden of Eden before the fall.
Hmm.
Weeds were a byproduct of the fall. So sin had infected so much, and now it's infected the wildlife. So now we're believing these things because now it's evolution, and Darwinism tells us that we're evolution from monkeys and all of these things. And when in reality, that's all, it's all garbage. It's all garbage. Like even carbon dating is off. Like it's all
Mm-hmm.
garbage. So, but the other thing I do have to say to someone who's struggling and dealing with these things, or even just struggling emotionally, I'm going to tell you the same thing I said when I walked into the congregation and I asked for the microphone the first couple of weeks I was there. Is you are not a product of your environment. You're not a product of your pain, and you're not a product of the lies that you've been told. But you are a product of God's very own hands. Nothing more, nothing less.
Oh,
Well
beautiful
said.
said.
I gotta say, Lady Griff, I truly appreciate all the time that you have put in to tell us your story today. I'm honored to have you on our podcast. I do like you to return. I would like to have updates. You ever want to speak on our show again, please? Just you have my IG, you have Christina's. Definitely let us know. I wish we could continue, but we I do have such a schedule. I don't know if you have any last words, Christina, you would like to say.
Oh man, I'm really, really grateful that you came on here. Because I know that it's not easy to tell your story, especially going down the depths of like that you did tonight on just your whole background. And just pretty much summing up for us that like anything that you try to find your identity in other than Christ himself will eventually compromise you. Like when we find our identities in the world, it will overtake us. But when we find our identities in Christ, he will literally take over us as well. And he just works from there. And it's just such an incredible testimony of faith and just what Jesus does. And like you said, like he just is willing to take us back from any depths. We're not too far broken. We're not too far down in the gutter. So I thank you so much for just giving us your time tonight. It's been such an honor getting to know you.
Yes, yes,
And I
definitely.
would love to have you back. I know during when we were interviewing, you know, on just a regular phone call, you were talking about this book where you kind of documented a conversation that you were having with God. I would love to have you back
Wow.
for that. If you want to touch on that for just a second, you can. But I thought it was really interesting because it kind of breaks everything down the way that you were going into it. So I think that would be an awesome to bring you back, you know, and kind of go into that too.
Yeah, definitely another discussion. And of course,
Yeah.
if you have anything outside of that you are trying to reach to other people and you will want them to reach out to you that's probably experiencing this or thinking about experiencing it and need another voice out there. If you have any type of social medias that you use to express what you went through to others, please let us know that as well.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's Lady Griffin on Instagram. Um, I think it's Lady_Griffin on Instagram. Um, yeah. Actually, I even have another version of my testimony. It's a Celebrate Recovery version of my testimony on my Instagram. If you would like to go back and view more of it, and there's a bunch of drumming videos and stuff on there too. One of my passions. So, yes. And if there's anybody that's watching as well, like if you would like to get a hold of me to have any discussions, questions, if I can answer it, I will. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to find you the answer. So, and thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much.
The honor is ours. The book she mentioned as well, you've written down, are you writing a book or are you in the process of actually having that published or something? Or is this just a diary that you keep all your notes?
So I got 3 different notebooks, and the one that she's referring to, I have to find. I've misplaced it, but yeah, in that I've had discussions with God while I was fasting from speaking. I've had um, one of the first things that He gave me, and the importance of the order of things is what was called, and it was just the step by step of the reasons why I could not be a man, and He went through Scripture step by step of exactly those things, and once I find it, I will be more than happy to share it. But I gotta
I would
find
love
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. This was a wonderful night. Thank you so much for joining us again. Of course, I am your host, LOAH, my co-host, Tina McGavin, Enlightened Housewife, and our special guest, Lady Griffin. We really enjoyed your story. And you're my first person I've ever spoke to that's been through something like that. So I appreciate you taking the time out tonight.
Thank you so much.
No problem. This was a great episode, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.